kind of example or idea. And that will be different, of course, at UVA in Illinois and any other public research institution in the US.
I would say we find out those things through the essay, through your application. And so making sure that it's not just good grades and test scores we're seeing. So filling out those extracurricular sections and letting us know what those are and making sure you answer every part of the essay. So I will say at Illinois, when it comes down to computer science applicants, it's the essay that makes or breaks students and if, how well did they answer those points and those questions. And so one of the things we are also asking and looking for is how do you look to improve engineering? How are you looking to improve society through this field of engineering? Students don't answer that part, and then that means that they're probably not paying attention to detail for us, and that's a huge piece that we're looking at as well. So I would say making sure that students answer every part of the application questions, giving us as much information, because in selective admissions, it comes down to more than the test scores and the grades. There's a lot of things that are being considered in that piece.
Thank you. With regards to some of these community engagement pieces, you know, in light of the pandemic and in light of lockdown, what would you say in terms of like virtual internships or you know, things that you do, you know, interning for your family or MOOC classes, online classes? How do you all see that in your application process?
So we know that this spring and this summer, everything's going to look different. Applications next fall are going to look different, and we are going to be recognizing that. And it's not just for students in one country or one part of the world. It really is for students worldwide. Transcripts are going to look a little bit different. The activity section of the application is going to look different. And we're very understanding of that. If you have to stay home all summer, opportunities are different. We know a lot of summer programs have been canceled. Traditional internships have been canceled. And I do encourage you to still explore your interests in whichever way you can, whether it is taking a course online, maybe it's working on some coding at home, trying to learn a new language, maybe it's reading books that you wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to read otherwise. There really is no right or wrong way to spend this spring and this summer. It is going to look different, and we are very understanding of that, and we're not going to be penalizing anyone by any means.
And do you all have suggestions? You know, should people write about these things in their essay? Is there what other places that can they give you that additional information to give you that context?
Yeah, each of our institutions uses either the Coalition app or the Common app in the application process. And both of those application platforms have actually created specific questions for students in the coming year, and probably will be a permanent question if I had to venture a guess as well, that specifically allows you to address how you have been impacted either by COVID-19 or any other kind of event outside of your control. I assume it will be left in place for natural disasters in years to come. And basically that's going to give you an opportunity, if you would like to take it, to speak to how you were impacted and how your experience might have looked different than you had anticipated it would look in your application. So a specific area where you can actually speak to that and address it. I would say that if left to, if that question didn't exist, we would see a lot of essays about that. But I think this frees you up to tell us about other important things to you still in your essay, while being able to explain what your circumstances are and have been and were during the pandemic specifically.
I'll just echo that. Even on institutional apps, we have a section where you can put anything else that you want us to know that might have impacted you. So know that each institution's also, even if they're not on a common sourced app, you'll have probably a way to express those things.
Wonderful. And you all mentioned, you know, large lecture classes and small seminar classes, and there is a question about how large can those large classes get?
I will start, let's pretend this is a normal year. The largest lecture hall we have on campus seats 750. it's not going to sit 750 this year. We are working so very closely with our local health officials, our state and federal, to make sure that we are within safety regulations. Currently in the state of Illinois, groups larger than 10 cannot be meeting in person. So as that kind of continues, we are going to be using that to guide our principals of how we can make sure students' safety and health is our top concern. So we, I think, are going to be losing that large lecture hall feel in person. It'll be turning to Zoom, and some of those as our large platforms for delivering information. But that's part of why the decisions haven't been made public so quickly yet, because we're trying to figure out those logistics and how can we make our campuses as safe as possible for students. And so I think you should know, while I mentioned large lecture halls, that's in a normal year when we don't have a pandemic. That's something we want to make sure you know, that they are going to be things and safety protocols in place. So as of right now in the state, there's only 10 people that can meet in a room. So that's probably a good guideline. I am assuming 50 will be what that capacity may be at most moving forward. So please know we are going to keep you and your students safe during our planning process.
Thank you so much for answering that. And I know there are a lot of uncertainties with what will happen in the fall. That leads into another common question that's being asked, which is, you know, what are your kind of policies about gap years and deferrals? And also, how do you think that that might impact the juniors and the sophomores even when they think about their admissions?
I think I'll just really quickly say this is a question you're going to want to reach out to each institution specifically about to make sure you're understanding their deferral and gap year policies. I believe all of us have some form of a deferral or gap year policy. It's going to look slightly different in terms of what you have to continue doing and what you may have to have in place during that time. So please reach out to each school because we do want to make sure we have flexibility and we'll respect your decision, as we know that this is uncertain times, and we want to make sure, you know, we want you here, whether that's not for this year or maybe it's next year, wherever you're comfortable. So work with us each individually. I think it's still too soon to tell what this means in terms of impact for future years, because many of our schools are allowing delays of admission up until the week before classes begin. And we truly won't know the size of the deferral class until around then. But I promise once we have that information, we will be sharing it publicly, or as much as we can with our counseling networks to get that information out as how this may impact future years. But we are keeping all of that in mind throughout this time.
Wonderful. There are some questions about, let's see, IB credits and AP credits, which I think maybe Sarah has already answered. But yes is the answer to that question. In terms of, there are some questions about financial aid. Do any of you have any insight about how scholarship availability and financial aid, how to approach that as an international student?
Yeah, so especially at public institutions in the US, unfortunately, we simply don't often have scholarship or financial aid that's typically available for international students. And an international student at each of our institutions would be defined as a non-US citizen or non-permanent resident. So if you are a US citizen living abroad, you are, at least at Georgia Tech, classified as a non-Georgia resident, but a domestic student. And so for international students specifically, we just simply don't have scholarship or aid available. Oftentimes public institutions are relatively less expensive than our private institution counterparts, but the sacrifice there is that we don't have the scholarship and financial aid resources oftentimes that those institutions would have, that's not dedicated to residents of our specific states. We each have opportunities to help supplement the cost of your education. I mentioned things like co-ops and internships is a great way to help supplement the cost. A lot of times, if you're competitive for admission to one of our institutions, you're oftentimes competitive for external scholarships that you can bring in to each of our institutions. But none of those things are likely to cover the full cost of attendance. And so it may not be the best fit if you do need full financial support to attend any of our institutions.
Wonderful. Well, unfortunately, we're closing up on our time, but I know there are a lot of questions here that still were not answered. And so we will definitely be collecting these questions and making sure that these go out to each of the admissions officers. Their email addresses are on here as well. My email address is on here as well. There was one more question that I'll throw in because it's related to InitialView, but how important is an interview in the process, if it is in your process, and what are you looking for in those interviews?
Yeah, I think an interview is just such a valuable opportunity in the holistic admission process. It does vary school by school what the interviews are like and how they're used, but I will say for UVA, for some students, it is English proficiency, and that's important, but we also want to know more about you, who you are, what you've been involved in, and it really just is an opportunity to showcase that. We don't have any interviews on grounds or alumni interviews, and it really is kind of that opportunity to have a conversation with us in a more interactive way than an essay or an activities section would be, or even sometimes letters of recommendation. So if you have the opportunity to do an interview through InitialView, I would definitely recommend it. I have rarely seen an interview that doesn't benefit an applicant.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us today. We will be sending some follow-up information with some relevant links for each of these institutions. And I just want to thank Sarah and Jess and Clara once more for joining us, taking time out of their busy, valuable day to spend time with us today. For all of you who've joined us, please pass the word to friends of yours. This recording will be available, and we are going to have more Tuesday Talks in the next month, 2 months, maybe even more. There are a lot of people who want to continue to have this great conversation about the importance of holistic admissions and welcoming students all over the world to the US. So thank you once again for your time, and have a great night, great day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you. Bye.